Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empower a Woman show, where we strengthen women with the Word of God. My name is Amanda, and with me on the show today is
Erica Ide Ichofu.
And today we also have one of my girls, one of my friends.
Can we just say our?
Okay, we can share her, but she belongs to me.
Does she? All right.
We've got my friend Izzy on the show with us today.
Hi everyone, my name's Isake Ifeasemota. Most people call me Izzy.
Everyone calls
you. So we've got Izzy on the show today. We are going to be talking about wives and daughters. I think this is one of my favorite episodes. Some of the most phenomenal women in the Bible we're going to talk about today. Should we just jump right in?
Yeah.
So that time doesn't get away with us. Let's just jump right in. Okay, so let's start with the wife of Noah and his daughters. Okay, so God gives Noah this word that there is going to be a flood. It's going to rain. So he builds this ark. And remember, this is a time when they have never ever seen rain. So can you imagine that conversation?
Yeah.
You know, him going to say to his wife, oh, and by the way, God has said I should build this ark, and then there's going to be rain. And, you know,
What's rain?
what is exactly, how does he say that to a woman, and how does she support him through this vision that God has given?
So not only does he spend years and years and years building an ark, I think sometimes when your husband is mad, it's fine if it's hidden. Right? If no one else can see your shame. But this was a very public spectacle of what could have been his madness, because he was building the ark for a really long time. Yeah. Oh, hey, Noah, what's going on? What are you doing? Oh, God told me to build an ark because there's going to be rain. What's rain? Well, you see, it's this. Just try and imagine that, right?
He didn't even know what rain was.
Exactly.
He didn't even know what rain was.
You know, I don't know what it is, but it's going to come, and I need to build this ark. And then he proceeds to gather 2 of every animal on planet Earth to bring into this house and says, oh, babe, so I'm going to build an ark. We're going to live in it with our family, and FYI, you're going to be taking care of a whole lot of animals as well. Honestly, I'm surprised that she stayed with him because, well, it's not like she had anywhere else to go, but I think that says something about her as well, that she stood by him, supported him, because he couldn't have done it alone.
What do you think, Izzy?
Yeah, and we don't see in the scriptures that God spoke to her. No. Mm-hmm. We don't see that, and yet she still followed him. She still had some level of faith, either in him or in God, and followed him.
Or both.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't going to be easy. I mean, this task and we don't see it, we don't read it, but just imagine what people would have been saying about him. Like, what is that your husband doing? What are you doing? Are you insane?
How do you think she responded to those questions, though? Right? Because I can imagine Noah beating his chest and say, God spoke to me. But what do you think she would have said when people asked her, what's going on with your husband?
God.
Okay, since we don't know what she said, what would you say in this age and time? Izzy, if you know you're married to a wonderful man, Joseph. If Joseph comes and says to you, God said I should build an ark because he's going to send fire from heaven. We've never seen fire come down from heaven. Yeah. But God says I should build a metal ark to protect us from this fire that's going to come from. What would you say to that?
Honestly, I think I would say, did you hear correctly?
Okay.
Did you hear correctly, first of all? And then I think I'd go back to God for confirmation. Just imagine that. Like, it just sounds crazy. It sounds just out of this world.
So that's why she's such a fantastic woman, because she stood by a man that was doing something so extraordinary. But then let's talk about his daughters-in-law. So it's one thing for the wife who's in covenant with him to say, this is what God has told me to do, and she stands by him. But then he's got 3 sons as well that are married to these women, and they are standing by their husbands, who is standing by their father.
So that's probably a bit easier to deal with, right? Because again, in those times, we know it was I can't say the word. Patriarchal.
Patriarchal.
That's why
you
we
still
need
got
easy.
it wrong. That word. So it was dominated by men, right? And I don't want to say women found their worth, but you know, there was a thing about the authority of a man over a woman. On the one hand, you could say they didn't really have a choice; they would follow their husbands. But on the other hand, I'd like to believe that they wanted to keep their family together. In their case, there was this home, there was going to be provision. Like, what's the worst that could have happened? You go into the ark, okay, there's no rain, you come back out of the ark. Maybe they would have laughed at you. Were you going to walk away from your marriage, you know? So yes, I think there were less, they had less of a struggle than Noah's wife, but I bet that some of that madness in your family, are you sure you're not going to leave this man, this family of mad people type thing would have probably happened, which is what will happen today, right? If you were married to a man whose father was seen to be doing something that made no sense, our people will say, this kind of thing runs in the family, save yourself while you can. But again, they chose to stay by their husbands and they went. And what I love about it is the fact that they repopulated the earth.
Exactly. I think at the end of the story, it's great because they out of these 3 women, the whole earth was repopulated. But before that, I don't think it would have been easy. I think it would have been even harder because you're not just expected. Remember, earlier on in the Bible, God talks about leaving and cleaving, right? So they're not even expected to just follow their husbands. They're expected to follow their father-in-law. Like, that's a mandate that must be really hard for them to fulfill. And also because it's out of this world, you know, what he's doing, it's a blind faith, not blind faith in the man you chose to marry and enter a covenant with. It's his father.
Yeah. So, but that's a very valid point, because when you commit to someone, you're not just committing to them, you're also committing to everything that they commit to. So choose wisely.
Well, let's go back a minute, because there's something that you said and there's something that Izzy said that maybe we lose in the course of talking about them very quickly. These 3 unnamed women in the Bible were responsible, because when the flood happened, they are ancestors basically. When the flood happened, everything else that was not in the ark died. So this is the world starting over, and the whole world, as we know it today now, has been repopulated by these 3 unnamed women in the Bible. I think that is phenomenal, it's significant. We don't talk about that enough. It's almost like, Noah's Ark happened and his daughters-in-law, and let's just forget about them. But no, let's bring them to the forefront and give them their due. Let's salute these women that we don't even know their names, but they did a significant job in being the reasons why we're here today, by the grace of God, and being the reasons why we're here today.
And I think, so yes, you say it's what came out of them was significant, but in their doing it, they wouldn't have seen it as significant. They wouldn't have known.
We have the benefit of hindsight.
Exactly.
Right now. Yes.
Which just draws back to one of the themes that I think in so far that we've been exploring this season, about in the process of just living your life and doing the right thing and doing what the Word of God says, God takes that faithfulness, God takes all of those ordinary things, and He makes it this amazing thing that, you know, you start to see in years to come. So it's just another reminder to just do what you know to be right and let God take your ordinary and make it extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think it also reminds me of the power of agreement, the power of agreement in a marriage, because they had to agree. They had to agree with God's plan. They had to agree with their husbands for the rest of the world to continue.
Absolutely.
They had to agree.
Yeah.
If they hadn't, though,
where would
we be?
Well, Noah's wife would have had a lot of population to do.
She would have had a huge responsibility.
After all, God started with Eve, so He could do it again for her.
So we've talked about these women that did extraordinary things in ensuring that the world continues as it is today. Let's talk about another set of women in the Bible that, did extraordinary things. So let's talk about Lot's wife and Lot's daughters. So if we start with his, shaking your head.
Can I
It's
please?
just devastating. Devastating.
Before we get into Lot's wives and daughters, I have to say something about Lot. And I don't know. So it bothers me how when the angels were in his house and the men from Sodom came and said, give us this, and Lot on his high horse, this is how I'm reading it, says, oh God, no, I'm protecting this man, you can't have them. Take my virgin daughters.
Yeah. Oh.
So you're not protecting your virgin daughters. I hope they didn't hear him, because as a child, if my father was offering me up as an offering to people who wanted to hurt someone, and anyway, I wanted to get that off my chest, because I just thought that was a bit rubbish.
Yeah.
Especially because he was trying to do that from a place of honor. So, unless maybe he knew that those men were, well, even if.
No.
I don't know what it was, but
It was. I think that's why I say it was devastating, because here we have Lot saying these two men, these angels, are under my protection. So he's indirectly saying my daughters aren't under my protection.
And I wonder, did they hear him?
And they had fiancés. They had fiancés.
Yes, yeah.
So he's saying, take my virgin daughters. And they had fiancés.
Yeah, well, that would have been the end, right? So if the men actually took the daughters, that would have been the end of them getting married or whatever. So I wonder, I'm not rewriting the Bible, but I just wonder if they heard that, and if perhaps that played into the decision they made at the end, or if it was more of the way they were raised that made them think it was okay to make decisions that were for you, and damning the consequences to other members of your family, because that's what what they did in the cave.
But remember that in Lot's decision, which of course I don't agree with, I wonder whether he was keen to do that because he recognized that he was talking to angels. So it doesn't make it right, but maybe there was something about these men that he encountered that it was almost like, I'll protect God regardless of what it's going to cost me, or I'll protect these men of God regardless of what it's going to cost me, which, unfortunately, the daughters would have been the pawns that would have been suffered.
I wouldn't say pawns, but they would
have been the ones
collateral damage, almost, yeah.
But not to move away from discussing the daughters, but doesn't that just show Lot's knowledge of God? Because we later see in the story that the angels blind the men.
So they could.
So that means that that
they
God
needed his help.
Yeah, they didn't need. He didn't.
Talked
need
about
to
women that were
offer-
helping God last.
Now we have a man that's trying to help.
Yeah.
He didn't need to offer his daughters because here there are angels who literally, probably minutes later, blinded all of these men from attacking them, which means that Lot himself didn't know the power of God and the power of these angels. He didn't need to offer his daughters.
And there's nothing in the Bible that's there by accident. There is something that we needed to learn, or we needed to see by that part of the Bible being there, which goes to your point of let God be God. Trust God to look after himself. We don't need to help God. We don't need to offer up the wrong thing to try to do the right thing. And maybe that's one of the reasons that's there in the Bible for us to see. But let's go back to his wife. So now the angels have blinded these men and has given them clear instructions that take everything that you have that's dear to you and flee, run away. And he says, don't look back. But she does.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard all sorts of preaches about how she was looking back because it was she was looking back to the life that she knew and all of that. Maybe she wanted to see what the destruction was. I don't know what it was, but she looked. So I was reading this and I was trying to place. Okay, I was thinking, so what was the order of things? Was she in front of Lot and was she running alongside the kids? Was she behind?
Wanting to check whether her daughters were coming.
Maybe not that, right? So I would imagine that Lot would have put them in front of, right? So let's go with me. Let's say she was running ahead of him and he was behind, and she looked back and she turned to a pillar of salt. He just kept going. he couldn't look back. And that struck me. So can you imagine the trauma for him and for the girls?
So you get to your destination like someone's missing.
Yeah, and we can't look back.
And they probably might have seen her. Oh, well, that's if they knew. I don't know.
Imagine if he didn't even see her. Like, everybody's just like
And
focused
they get there and then
they get us like,
oh,
one person's missing. What's happened? But anyway, they get there, and it is Lot and his daughters. Now, these girls have a conversation with each other that goes along the lines of, well, we're in this foreign place. We've just seen the massive destruction that's happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where they were born. That's all they know. Do they know whether there are any other towns or village? I mean, maybe they don't know. But in their ignorance, or in their, should I use the word wisdom? Maybe in their wisdom, with what they knew then was, so that our father's lineage continues.
They were trying to help him.
I think that there are a couple of things here. The first thing, they knew that they were doing wrong because they had to get their father drunk to have intercourse with him.
Absolutely.
So they knew.
Because if they knew that, if they actually believed that this was something worth doing, and that they were doing it for their father, because it's like, so that our father's lineage continues, let us get him drunk and let's sleep with him. No.
They also did not have faith in God, because God literally just saved them from sulfur, from death. The entire Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed.
You don't even know what's happening in the world, and then you want to bring kids into the world.
You don't trust God to find you a husband? You had to do that with your father?
So that's what they did. So they took it in turns. It was so premeditated. Let's get him drunk tonight, and then you go and lay with him, and then tomorrow will be my turn.
First one's like, yeah, I've done it. Yeah.
What kind of conversation? But what we see is, out of that illicit encounter begins the genealogy of
God still
they're in the genealogy of Jesus. So
Yeah.
God still uses our mess to bring a message out of it.
But does it also show that they are a product of their environment? The fact that they can think of doing that, is that just because they grew up in Sodom and Gomorrah?
That's exactly what I was wondering. The decisions that they made in the cave there must have been something about their environment, their upbringing, something that they brought with them out of Sodom and Gomorrah that encouraged them to. That's not the kind of thing that you think about. But I guess the most fascinating part of it for me was the way they tried to justify it. Almost like, okay, the Bible, God's word, not the Bible at the time, but the law. Oh, you know what? God wants us to keep this lineage going. So let's help God and help our Father and do this terrible thing. And that happens. Yeah, that happens in our lives, where we can find good reasons for doing the wrong thing.
I think it shows that we have a strong ability to deceive ourselves. We have a huge ability to convince ourselves to do wrong.
Yep.
They were so, from reading the text, they were just so sure of themselves. And they literally did the most horrible thing that they could do.
Yeah. So where's the God in this? The God in their story, the lesson that we can learn from it is, even in the middle of the things that, when we make wrong choices, there is still redemption.
Yes.
But there's consequence that comes out of the wrong choices, because she becomes the mother of the Moabites, and then her sister has Ben-Amin, who becomes the father of the Ammonites. And we can see that the Moabites and the Ammonites become enemies of Israel. They're constantly in battle. They're constantly fighting, fighting God's people. And it's just a consequence of difficult decisions. However, we also know that Ruth was a Moabite, and she was the what's her name? One of the daughters was the father of Perez, who, again, the genealogy of Jesus comes out of. So there's the redemption aspect to that story. But then let's just touch on, before we close, another set of wife and daughters: Job's wife and Job's daughters.
Curse God and die.
Curse God and die. What would you have done, though? So as the story goes, we know that the enemy and God are having this conversation, and he says, have you considered my son Job? And, you know, God allows the devil to tempt Job. And we see that his 7 sons and 3 daughters had 10 children. All died, literally minutes apart of each other.
What was her plan? So she had lost all her kids. Her husband was in despair. This was a woman, lost all her wealthy, earthly belongings and everything. In a patriarchal society as well, this is her final bit of protection. And you're encouraging him to do something that will cause him to lose his life. What was she thinking?
That's the point. I don't think that she was thinking, this is a mother that was grieving.
So you think it was from a place of...
It was from a place of pain. What would you do in that circumstance? I think we give her such a... And I'm not saying that her reaction was the right thing. I'm just saying I understand. Okay. When you're in a place of grief, you've lost 10 children. Even losing one can do that to you. There's some people that, you know, they don't even lose 10 children. Something small just happens and they're turning their backs on God. Haven't you seen it happen? Yeah. Oh, you know, something, let me not say small, is relative, but it's not compared to losing 10 children. Like there's a sickness or there's a loss, they've lost their job. They curse God.
Yeah, well, true.
Do you see what I'm saying? So I understand.
I will put my hand up and say I hadn't looked at it from that angle. I just wondered, like, what's your plan? Why are you encouraging him to do this? But again, you're right.
I think that there's a double meaning here, because if we translate the word curse, it's barak. And it doesn't always mean curse in other areas of the Bible. But even if it does mean curse in this situation, I feel like there's a double meaning, that she's saying engage. Don't just passively, Job is saying, you know, we receive good from God, we receive bad from God. It's just like passive. But she's saying, I felt like there's a double meaning.
Like, don't do something.
Don't
one way or the other. Don't just
receive this. Like, don't passively receive this. That's kind of how I look at it. Because if we get to the end, the 3 friends are condemned by God, but she isn't. So clearly, the thousands of years that we've discussed this woman, God did not condemn her. God didn't condemn her. So this curse God and die, and the original meaning, you know, barak, I don't know. I'm still undecided.
That's an interesting perspective. Okay, so both of you have challenged my thinking about this woman. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to ponder on the barak, and I'm going to ponder on the grief thing. But again,
perhaps that's something that we should get our audience to do. What's your interpretation of curse God and die? Maybe this is... Do some Bible history and send us an email or interact with us on our socials and tell us, what do you think when you read this story? Historically, there have been 2 camps. There have been women that have been on the side of, I understand why she did that, but there have been other women that, I will never do that. It was wrong for her to do that. What are your thoughts? We're interested in hearing from you. I just wanted to say that to the audience.
Yeah, no, and then just going back again to God being a God that brings beauty from ashes and restores and redeems and all of that. At the end of it, she got 10 more kids, same number, seven sons, and 3, apparently, goddesses. Very, very, very beautiful.
The most beautiful in all the land, the way the Bible describes them.
So, yeah, no, again, just the fact that God rewarded them or restored back to them.
And she was part of that restoration.
Exactly, because
she was part of that.
Yeah, she was part of it, because if you know, when you're saying God chastised the 3 friends, he did nothing to her.
Exactly.
You know, well, she was part of the blessing. She was part of the restoration, and whatever grief that she might have had for losing her 10 kids. This is not a replacement, but you know, God gave her 10 more kids that were even more beautiful and more wonderful than the ones she had before. Almost like, I know you just had a taste of a sour lemon. Here's a sweet orange to help remove that bitter taste from your mouth. And I think that that's amazing.
The thing that I also love in this story is the 3 daughters are named. So the Bible tells us that God gives Job 7 sons and 3 daughters, Jemima, Keziah, and Karen. I can't pronounce the other bits. Karen H. The boys are not named, but the girls are. And I think that that's significant, isn't it? That not only does the Bible take the time to say they were the most beautiful girls in the land, but takes the time to name them. But also, Job does something that's countercultural at that time, where he gives his daughters an inheritance in the same way that he gives his sons an inheritance. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing to see in Scripture. In season 1, we talked about the daughters of Zed, where we see that inheritance happen.
Like I still said Zed and not
daughters of Zed, Zelophehad. Yeah. Depending on the timing of the Bible, you know, some people argue that Job is kind of after Genesis, so that would have even been before the daughters of Zed. Would that have been something that encouraged them to even say, let's go and ask Moses for a portion of our land? But what we see is that inheritance happens after their father has passed away. But this is different because this is Job intentionally giving them an inheritance and making them almost equal with his sons. Like, we've never seen that in the Bible. That was just fascinating to see.
Yeah.
God honors us women. He honored us then. He honors us now. And we should never forget that, irrespective of what society might say about us women or what other people might say about us as women, that God values us. He always has. He's always honored us. We are co-heirs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to Job's wife. So yes, bad rap, curse God and die and everything, but she stood by him. So yes, they both went through grief and everything, but then he was afflicted and he basically was of no use to her or to anything. And again, bear in mind that they had lost everything. So what was she doing during that time to keep them going? She must have been feeding him and clothing him and bathing him and all of those things, you know, even in her grief.
And she must have been strong. I don't know about you. I have 3 children and it's like, God, no more. This woman had 20. 10 at first and then another 10. So she was a strong woman.
Yeah,
20 children.
It wasn't easy for her. I'm glad that at the end of her life, you know, towards the end, that God restored to them and they got even more than they started off with, because she needed a break. She needed to be able to put her feet up. Yeah, she needed a little bit of a rest because she had a hard time.
Yeah.
She had.
Thank you, ladies, so much. I think it's been really important that we had the opportunity to talk about the wives and the daughters. It's been such a fantastic show. Until next week, when we get to talk about more women in the Bible, it's been a pleasure hosting you. Thank you for joining us on the show today.